And you're looking at the New York Stock Exchange, folks, where the market is just closed, April 10th. Another volatile day. Another very, very volatile day. We seem to have these extremely volatile days lately. The market ending down 1,000 points, 1,024 or so points. S&P down 189, NASDAQ down 737. There it is. Some big moves on the downside today. And again, after that massive move up yesterday. So yesterday we were looking at that, and the Dow was up 2,964 points. Gave about a third of it back today. So trying to figure that. At one point, it was down over 2,300 points today. So we're seeing massive volatility because the market, the money people, the people around the globe who all come to Wall Street to bet on what's happening next are trying to figure out what's happening next. And you know, again, in one day alone, in one single day alone, yesterday we had in the morning, we'll never move away from these tariff positions that the Trump administration has put on the world. And at 118 yesterday, we saw them move to a 90-day pause with some caveats. Market just exploded 3,000 points up. Today, people are saying, well, what does it mean? Are these deals in place? Volatility is here and probably here to stay for the foreseeable future, especially when China is trying to play hardball with the United States. Now, the insane nature of this, I can't explain. I can tell you I've done this for a long time. I was on Wall Street for 15 years before I ever started TV 17 years ago. And I'll tell you, I know all this stuff that's going on Wall Street. What I don't know is when China thinks that because they're providing us with cheap goods, we're the buyer, that they can play hardball with us. The world could have. Like, the world could have said, you know what, Trump, go screw yourself. We're going to play hardball with you. But they were smart and they said, let's make trade deals. Let's make sure that our individual countries are going to be okay with the United States, the largest consumer of every single one of these countries. They were smart. China holding out alone has put themselves in a corner. They've painted themselves in a corner. I hope to think that Trump and the administration is playing 4D chess by saying, you know, we're going to raise all these tariffs. We're going to let them all down. And if China doesn't play ball, we're going to keep it on them, pointing the finger at China. It may be a brilliant strategy. Too soon to tell. Market's still weeding out what they like, what they don't like from this. So that said, let's get some inside information, not inside information in the trading world. It's inside baseball information from Special Assistant to the President and Principal Deputy Press Secretary Harrison Fields. Harrison, really good to have you on, my friend. Glad you're here. And I look at the White House in the background. A lot going on. We saw the cabinet meeting today. We'll get to the inflation number, which is really good for you guys. Fantastic. But can you just give us a sense inside the comms shop? You guys are tasked with a very difficult job to put out what the president's thinking and saying. That's literally what your job is. But also putting it out in a way that doesn't alarm people if it's something that could be concerning, and also doesn't give false hope to other folks. So give us a sense of, especially, how is the tariff situation going from inside 1600?
Well, the easy thing for us, Eric, is that President Trump has been consistent on this issue 30 plus years ago when he was just an ordinary citizen that was running New York City as a business mogul. He was on top of tariffs before tariffs became news on the street. And you know who else was also on top of the issue of tariffs? Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Sherrod Brown, all prominent Democrats who 10, 20, 30 years ago sounded like a MAGA Republican, and then today they're making it seem like we are out to destroy our country and the world. So you really can't make this stuff up. It was common practice. It was good politics to stand for the American worker. I don't know when that ended, but President Trump is bringing that back. Why have we relinquished control of Detroit, of Milwaukee, of Buffalo, New York, to China, Vietnam, and Cambodia? President Trump is standing up for the United States of America, and that's exactly what this tariff policy is doing. And the good news is we have north of 75 countries who have been banging down the doors of this White House, ensuring that we communicate and work on a better deal, not just for America, but for their countries, again, only possible because of the leadership of President Trump.
Yeah, and Harrison, I agree with you. I think the way this has played out, I didn't see it coming. I'm a free, just be fully transparent here. My audience will tell you I'm a free market person. I don't like government getting involved in the markets in any way, shape, or form. I like small government. I'm libertarian. When the world came and said we don't want this fight, and China didn't come, it actually played exactly into Trump's hands. Was that the plan all along, or did it just happen to be just complete fortunate situation, string of situations?
Well, the president understands Xi very well. He's dealt with him for 4 years, and here he is dealing with him again. And I'll tell you this, that President Trump is always going to be playing chess when the Chinese are playing checkers. And they, unfortunately, are in an ocean, and they're looking for a lifeline right now. And President Trump will always be here to negotiate. But that deal has to not just reflect the tariff situation. China's doing so much more on the back end with currency manipulation, devaluing a lot of our goods when it comes to the theft of IP, and a host of other things that is putting American companies at a disadvantage when they do work in China. But we also realize that American companies were tired of this, and this is why they started moving to places like Korea and moving places to Vietnam and Cambodia. So there's a lot of different elements when it comes to China. President Trump understands exactly how they operate, which is why he increased the tariff burden on that nation. And we are not afraid. Eric, you talked about it very well. They need us more than we need them, and they will soon come to the table, because working with the United States on this fight is the smart thing to do for the people of China. And I think President Xi is going to come around and realize that America is back in the driver's seat. You don't have a president who wasn't even in the car when you look at Joe Biden. And I think this is all going to be resolved very well.
Yeah, so China needs us more than we need them. I'm just blown away at the left, these liberals who are literally I'm looking at Tim Walz cheering Tesla going down, an American company completely domiciled in the state of Texas. I'm watching various talking heads who are very liberal, they've always been Biden and Obama supporters, who were happy when the market was tanking because it was President Trump's idea and it was his tariff idea. When it went up 3,000 points yesterday, they had the long faces. They were more concerned when the market was going up and America was getting healthier again. The economy was getting healthier. The markets were getting healthier. And it strikes me as that these people are so deranged, hate Trump and the administration so much that they'll put suffering on themselves and their constituents just so President Trump isn't proven right on anything, literally.
Yeah, it's a devastating reality of today's Democratic Party, who is led by Jasmine Crockett, of all people. The reality is President Trump was elected because of a Democratic Party that completely ignored the concerns of everyday Americans. They lied to the American people and said that inflation was transitory. They lied and said we weren't in a recession when we had 2 quarters of negative growth. They said that the border was secure. They said that we were entering a world of peace when war was raging and we were on the brink of World War III. So the Democrats really have no legitimacy, and right behind them is the media that has zero credibility, and we deal with them every single day. So the reality is President Trump is here on an unprecedented mandate by 77 million Americans. We have a House and a Senate that is on the verge of passing historic tax cuts, deregulation, border security, and a host of other great things for this country to get our fiscal house back in order. And this is only in 3 months. So could you imagine what the next 3.5 years is going to look like? We are moving full steam ahead, despite the lawsuits, despite the craziness, and President Trump is committed.
It's going to look great. So I'm going to qualify this. Harrison, I don't know if we've ever met personally. I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing numbers. I've been doing statistics. I'm just, the guys will tell you, I crunch numbers like crazy. Within a couple hours of the announcement of the tariffs, and Howard Lutnick brought out that big board with the numbers, and I was looking at it, and it just wasn't it just wasn't working for me. And when it doesn't work up here for me, I know something's wrong with the numbers. I had figured out that the methodology to come up with the tariff that we were going to slap on other countries had nothing to do with an actual tariff, or we're half of what they're doing. It had to do with our trade imbalance number divided by the amount of exports that country was putting into our country. And for me, I was just like, can't Howard just come up with it's like a real? I literally called the White House and said, guys, I figured this out. I need you guys to get in front of it before the left figures out and holds you accountable to it. And they did. And I wished that would have been clean. And I know they sent Trump out there without him even really knowing how that number was calculated. That ticked me off. Here's my point. I have a really important idea for you guys. And again, Steve Bannon and I talk about it every day. Liquefied natural gas. We are an abundant producer of LNG in this country. The left doesn't want us to produce it, doesn't want us to export it. Get the LNG deal with China. Give China a deal with our LNG, get them to drop their tariffs, and all of a sudden, you want to see a stock market, an equity market, a labor market, a housing market, and everything market explode, and America will be in the top of the heap of all of it. Boom. Because you hold China accountable, and they have to play ball because they need gas. They need energy products.
Well, Eric, you're a big thinker, and I appreciate the recommendations, and I'm sure the people making those decisions are watching your program right now, and they'll take note of it. But I'll tell you this, President Trump is in the driver's seat. He understands how these numbers work, and they're a reflection of not just the tariffs and the deficits, but also the other aspects of trade that have completely imbalanced the relationship, not just of recent history, but for long history. So that's where those numbers came from. And the reality is now we're back to 10% baseline for every trading country, minus China, and then some of the sectorial tariffs are still in effect. But the reality is the American people are supportive of this action because they are tired of being taken advantage of again. And they also know that countries are coming to the table and we're negotiating great trade deals. So that's where that stands right now. When you talk about LNG, we have a great secretary and Secretary Wright, who is now taking off the shackles of that industry, and we are producing LNG and exporting it once again at historic levels. So we are making tremendous progress when it comes to LNG. We've got the best stuff in the business. Of course, China would want to leverage that relationship and take some of our LNG, and we'll see what happens. These negotiations are ongoing, and I'll let the leaders of those negotiations play with what trading aspects we're going to use.
Yeah, and this topic that we started here, and this is very, very important. You guys this is super success story right here. Inflation. You guys are bringing inflation down, and legitimately. None of this games with statistics. Legitimately, inflation is down to 2.39% that was announced, the CPI today. Fantastic. More than a point lower than it was a year ago under Joe Biden's last few months before he went away. A third, almost a quarter of it was at the peak of Joe Biden's nonsense Bidenomics. Egg prices coming down, gas price. And by the way, folks, with this new latest round of tariff and market reaction, oil prices are down. Gasoline prices are going to go down $1 a gallon in the next 45 days. Mark my words. This is great news for you. Congratulations. Take a victory lap on that one, Harrison.
Oh, definitely. I mean, my home state of Florida is seeing 30 to 40 cent decreases from last year. We're seeing across the board decreases when it comes to gas prices, which is impacting every single day Americans. You know this as an economic wizard, that when gas prices, when fuel prices, when energy prices are low, that is going to have a positive effect throughout the entire economy because our economy runs on energy. Inflation is coming down and America is rising, which is a great thing. You know it's a bad thing for the Democratic Party when all they can focus on is that eggs had a slight increase in prices days before Easter, in which eggs are being bought at an absurd amount, absurd level. That would be like them talking about how the price of Hershey's are going up days before Halloween. This is just how this stuff works. When you look at wholesale prices, those prices are staying low. They're going even lower. Retail usually catches up, as you know very well. But the good news is inflation is on a decline, and what's going up? Jobs. We are creating more jobs, beating expectations. The economy is on a firm footing, and we haven't even got into tax cuts yet, which is on the way.
Right. Yep. We just passed the budget, and you got that on the way as well. Harrison Fields, you're a great spokesperson for this administration. We'd love to get you back again real soon because I like having these kind of these little bit more number-focused discussions. Most people can't handle it, and I love having you on. You're doing a great job. Harrison Fields, Special Assistant to the President and Principal Deputy Press Secretary. Doing a great job, my friend.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you.
I'll see you again soon. All right, folks, we shall be back in 2.5. Scottsville, Kentucky. Now, Mad Dog, can you jump on for a second real quick? I know we're pressed for time because that was a great interview with Harrison Fields. That kid is smart. He's going places. Scottsville, Kentucky. Where the hell is Scottsville, Kentucky? You don't know, do you?
No, I don't know.
Okay, all right. All right, folks. So 2 days ago, we did an interview with Gordon Chang about China. He's an expert on all things China. We got blown out by the president that day. He had some announcements. Yesterday, we got blown out by the president. Again, we were unable to air that interview. I want to air it now, and I just want you to know, it's still, It still lives. It's 2 days later, but everything Gordon and I spoke about are still in play, especially with the tariffs. They've moved around a little bit with the numbers and the tariffs, but nothing has changed. China is still our number one adversary, and they're still the world's bad guy. Take a look. All right, folks. Welcome back. My next guest, an attorney, expert, and author on none other than China. His latest book is called Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Welcome, Gordon Chang. Gordon, really good to have you back on the show, my friend, and what an important person to be on right now with this trade war that seems to be sparking up. Whew, Gordon, 104%. So we start with the Trump says that his tariffs are in response to tariffs on other countries are putting on us. So Trump puts a 32% import tariff on China. They respond with a 50% on America. Trump turns around and says, you want to play games with us? Here's a 104% tariff on all Chinese imports. And Gordon, I'm looking now, we have a massive trade imbalance with China, $300 billion last reportable year. We import electrical machinery, toys, plastics, furniture, vehicles, articles of iron and steel, optic. The list goes on and on. How dangerous is this trade war?
Well, the trade war is dangerous in the sense that I think the Chinese regime is going to get desperate. They have no way out of this. When President Trump promised 50% tariffs on China, he was basically saying to the Chinese regime, look, you cannot intimidate me. China has no ammunition in this trade war. The only way they can win is if they force President Trump to back down, even though Trump holds the high cards. Which, as I mentioned, with this 50% tariff announcement, basically Trump was saying, no, you are not forcing us into submission. And that means China right now probably getting a little bit desperate. And we don't know what they'll do, Eric. So, yeah, this is a very precarious and very fragile time for us.
Take China, Gordon. You know China. You know Chinese people. Take us inside the mind of Xi Jinping right now, and the Chinese people, for that matter. Where I look at it like this: America's the biggest buyer of stuff around the world. We're the biggest consumer. You walk into a mall and you have a massive amount on your credit card that you can spend. And then for China to say, well, we're going to raise your prices, that's not the way to go. But somehow they're thinking raising our prices is going to make Trump back down. Do they not know Trump doesn't back down to anyone?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think they understand President Trump. But second of all, the Chinese desperately need access to the U.S. market. They need to maintain it. If we go back to 2018 for context, when Trump put on his 25% tariffs, China picked up somewhere between 75 to 81% of the cost of that in order to maintain their share of the U.S. market. Well, today, for various reasons, China has even greater motivation to maintain its access to America, which means we now know they already are trying to absorb some of those tariffs through weakening their currency, plus also increasing their subsidies to Chinese exporters. But they can't do that for very long. And I think they're running out of cash. So this doesn't leave them with many options. But, President Trump has, I think, scoped this out pretty well. As Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said a few hours ago, look, the Chinese are playing cards with only a pair of twos. And that's actually being quite generous to the Chinese, because I'm not even sure they've got a pair of anything.
Yeah. Well, Trump has a pair of something, and it doesn't seem like he's going to back down with that pair. And I wonder how this plays out, because clearly the equity markets don't like the fighting going on. So Xi Jinping says, so I'm going to retaliate by telling you, F around and find out, Trump, we're going to raise your import fees, what we export into China, to 104%. I mean, this is a game of who can pee further, so to speak. And guess what? We're holding the cards because we're the buyer, they're the seller. I just don't understand the rationale. I mean, do they believe that the American people are going to push back on Donald Trump and they're going to get some sort of relief that way?
That's what they're trying to do. And they're trying to work through the American political system to put pressure on the White House. So, for instance, just a few hours ago, they said, well, look, we might bar all U.S. movies in China. Well, that's an attempt to get Hollywood on board, to get them to get the phone and call 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and say, you got to stop this. But I don't think that Trump is going to be really susceptible to that, because he understands that China has been ripping us off for decades. This is unsustainable. The United States, just in general, Eric, we account for almost half of the world's trade deficits. And that means we can't sustain that for much longer. So, one of the things we can say, well, we don't like the way Trump handling this. Well, maybe that's the case. But the point is,
I just don't understand why the White House doesn't get this message out.
Well,
we're doing this just so that you lower your tariffs, your obstructions into your markets, so we can lower ours back down. They've lost that messaging, Gordon, and instead we're going to build a wall this way. Well, we'll build this way. Well, that's insanity. That's mutual destruction for the two major economies on the globe. I think the Trump administration needs to say, everyone calm down. We're going to lower these when you guys do. And then guess what happens? You unleash the power of a $27 trillion economy that's 70% consumer spending, buying all these idiots crap. They don't realize, but the messaging is being lost by the White House, is losing the messaging battle. I got just a couple of minutes. You want to weigh in on that? And I want to talk oil real quick, Gordon.
Yeah, well, Trump is negotiating deals with other countries. More than 70 countries have contacted the White House to try to stitch up a trade arrangement. That's good because it means that we're going to be buying our stuff from other countries, and they're our friends instead of China, which is an enemy. So I think that this is going to go in the right direction, but it's going to take a little time to sort itself out. And in the meantime, it's going to look pretty ugly, but I think it'll work because Trump's grand strategy is ultimately the right one.
Oil, my other big concern here. China needs oil. They don't produce a lot. They use a lot. Russia produces a lot of oil. They're using some of it with their war, but they can't sell it because we've essentially embargoed their oil, and anyone else that wants to buy their oil is going to get embargoed by Trump. So Russia's looking for a home to sell oil. Perfect match here. The concern is that both of them tell us to go jump the United States, and oil goes from Russia to China. Money goes from China to Russia, which they desperately need. They leave us out of the picture.
Yes, well, one of the good things about Trump is that he understands that oil and LNG gives the U.S. leverage. And we're going to be selling a lot more of that around the world to Europe, so it's not as dependent on Moscow, but also to our friends in Asia, especially Japan, South Korea. So Trump's got the right idea about LNG and oil. And we're going to drill and we're going to sell.
It would be amazing if somehow Trump created a deal that will sell you oil. You lower your trade barriers, you lower it down to where we are, and we'll bring them down to 20% across the board unilaterally, and we'll sell you some oil and LNG. We'll ship some LNG right to you. What a deal that would be. You want to see a stock market and equity markets take off, and want to see the American economy take off. That's how you do it. Gordon Chang, really good having you on, my friend. We'll get you back again real soon.
And congratulations on last night and the Gators.
Chop, chop. Thank the Hard Rock bet people for paying off that bet right away. Gordon, really good talking to you. Talk to you again soon, my friend.
Bye.
All right, folks, we'll be back in. Always good talking to Gordon. But before I head to break, I just want to remind you all about my podcast and YouTube page, which are both updated daily and let you hear this show, and tons of other new, unique content anytime, anywhere. Be sure to subscribe. Now, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a minute. We'll be back in 2 minutes. North Carolina, beautiful breeze there. All righty, friends, I think we finally found something the liberal left lunatics love more than Venezuelan violent gang members who are in our country illegally. They like the Chinese Communist Party even better.
The trade is asymmetrical.
And who voted for Donald Trump?
Precisely. Trade is asymmetrical with China. We imported over 439 billion products from China. We exported over 140 billion from China. Their own foreign ministry has said, we will not flinch. We will not genuflect to a bullying government. I respectfully disagree.
You, though, Tiffany, that we rely so much on an adversary to make most of our goods?
Listen, whether it bothers me or not is irrelevant. I'm dealing with reality.
It's important, though.
It is important, but this is what it is.
You're okay if we continue to put our own economic and national security future in the hands of our biggest enemy, because effectively they use slave labor to build stuff, and that makes it better for us.
They love hating America so much. So is this what it is? We should continue with the status quo with our adversary, our biggest adversary, that woman says. So They love violence with the most. They love gangbangers the most. They love terrorists the most. They love Ukraine the most, the left. And they also now love Chinese communists the most. Well, if we're giving out prizes, then this guy right here might love the Chinese more than most. Oh, and the guy who loves a Chinese spy has something to say about tariffs, too, specifically. The walking embarrassment to this country named Eric Swalwell has a message for President Trump.
And you don't know what you're doing. You don't have a clue what you're doing. And by the way, you look weak. You put these tariffs in place. You say they're non-negotiable. You don't get anything in return. And then you put a pause on them. You just look weak.
I don't know. Call me crazy. Let me think. Maybe, just maybe, the guy who bedded a Chinese spy, Fang, should just keep his trap shut about being weak. Just saying, but I digress on purpose. So, are we just steps away from seeing CCP flags replacing Ukrainian flags in Democrats' social media bios? Are we about to see pro-CCP marches down our busiest blue streets, main streets across Democrat cities? Let's find out. Let's get into it. Part of the showdown on tariffs has been about identifying who our friends are and who our enemies are. I think it's pretty clear. While some countries momentarily mulled over retribution, most of them, if not all of them, either decided against it or changed their minds. Regardless of whether or not it was President Trump's full intention to do so, and I believe it was, given his negotiation skills, art of the deal, this much is clear. China has been and remains our major adversary. But you see, this whole thing also exposes the left and their true love of China. And while that may not have always been the case,
we're bringing a new trade case against China, and we're being joined by Japan and some of our European allies.
I tend to more agree with President Trump than I did with President Obama on Bush on trade.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo?
Pretty much sounds like those liberal Democrats, Obama and Pelosi, were all for slapping tariffs on China when they had the ball. So you see, while it may not always have been the case that the left has a love affair with China, it seems very true now.
And that's why I want to say again, the United States welcomes the rise of a China that is peaceful, stable, prosperous, and a responsible player in global affairs.
He welcomes China's rise. Oh, I'll bet you do, Barack, you good little globalist soldier, you. You see, it all started with Barack Obama. When the New World Order found their willing American soldier in Barack Obama, useful idiot, China's rise became celebrated, supported, so long as it's, peaceful. The leftist PR machine was hard at work, framing China's rise as a good thing. Good for America and good for the world, the leftists said. And the love affair with one of the world's worst human rights abusers was born. And now the left. I love China.
When I was a little girl, I was told at the beach if I dug a hole deep enough, we would reach China. So we've always felt a connection there.
Whatever. Yep, that's right. China's just the best, says their eager former Canadian employee.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime.
Yeah, so admirable, Justin, wussy. A leftist just adores a dictatorship, don't they? All of them. Explains a whole heck of a lot. And to a Democrat, dictatorship is, well, freeing.
China is one of the freest societies in the world. Don't take it from me. That's from Freedom House.
Them leftists loves them some China and hates them some America, don't they? The left loves a country that sends the gift of a killer virus to the world. They love how they made it, China spread it, and then China covered it all up. The left loves the ways, the communism ways, their total control. The left loves China, and this is what we've come to. And now they're freaking out because President Trump is holding China's feet to the fire, something the left once believed in He's holding them accountable after Barack Obama and Joe Biden let China have their way with our economy, with lopsided trade, after China spent years adjusting their currency to make it worse for us, more advantageous for them, stealing our technology left and right and our patents and intellectual property. President Trump has always known and understood that truth, that China has dreams of dominating the world. They do. They want to take us over. And Barack Obama and then Joe Biden were in full support of that. Two useful idiots. But it wasn't just that. That's not all. Turns out that it wasn't just our leftist politicians who were in bed with the Chinese Communist Party, figuratively speaking. Well, not really Swalwell, but I digress, again, on purpose. Turns out that Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, Facebook at the time, actively helped China in the race, get this, to develop AI, artificial intelligence, faster than us in America. Former Meta executive turned whistleblower Sarah Wynne Williams said as much in a bombshell Senate hearing yesterday.
So I want to just be clear about this. Here in this document, Facebook is talking about making Chinese user data available to the Chinese government because they're going to store that data in China. Is that correct?
Correct.
But when you store that data in China, Americans who exchange messages or other information with Chinese Facebook users, that would mean the Chinese government could get access to the American data as well. Is that correct?
Through the POP servers, potentially, yes.
And Facebook was willing to take that risk?
Yes, there was a lot of discussion about this, and ultimately, yes.
I mean, this is extraordinary. This is exactly contrary to what Facebook has represented for years. Here, they're willing to build data centers, store data in China. They are willing explicitly to give the Chinese government access to it. And if that means that American user data is also compromised, they're willing to do that
So
too.
Zuckerberg, Facebook, Meta gave access to our data to China. Seriously, this is pure treason.
I saw Meta executives repeatedly undermine U.S. national security and betray American values. They did these things in secret to win favor with Beijing and build an $18 billion business in China.
Repeatedly undermining our national security, betraying American values. Wynne Williams was Facebook's former director of global public policy, and she says that Meta gave briefings to the Chinese Communist Party, gave the CCP access to our data, not hacked, not stolen, handed over on a silver platter given. That is treasonous, and it's betrayal. It's not just forget that China is our adversary. The left wants us to forget that. The globalists and New World Order soldiers want us to forget that, but don't forget it.
I filed a bill yesterday to deny now student visas to Chinese students because China has just passed a law that now requires every national to gather intelligence, including Chinese students here studying, gather intelligence and report
Chinese
back.
police stations in the U.S., cities spying on us from their own police stations within our cities. Chinese buying up our farmland, buying data and secrets from our own companies, telling students to collect data and report back to Beijing. The left can admire China all they want, but President Trump understands and remembers exactly who our enemies are and how to deal with them. After years and years of Democrats bending the knee, and that's exactly what MAGA is all about. And that, folks, is exactly what I voted for. Before we go, just want to remind you about my podcast and YouTube page, both updated daily. Let you watch and hear this show, but also tons of other new content anywhere, anytime. Be sure to subscribe now. Don't miss out. Subscribe right there. Back in 2.5 with Ben. That's a little bit of a tease of what we're going to talk to Mr. Bannon about. First, we have a little bit of the Seinfeld show music, and then we bump in with Macau, China. By the way, Macau, China is, it competes with Las Vegas as the gaming capital of the world. Vegas is clearly number one. Macau, China is probably very close to them as far as dollars won and lost in their city, Macau, China. I've never been there, but I'm a big gambler and been to Vegas a gazillion times. I'd like to see Macau. Let's bring in Steve Bannon. Steve, good to have you, my friend. Yeah, Dow took a bit of a hit today, but a nice rally off the bottom to his 2,300 lower, ended up 1,000 lower. kind of crazy. I guess people are just digesting what's going on. But something we talked about yesterday, did they play 4D chess and paint Xi Jinping into a corner by having the rest of the world say, we'll play ball, China, you're not going to play ball, we're going at you mano a mano. That seems like a brilliant strategy. I don't think Howard Lutnick's smart enough to come up with that, though.
We're going to find out. We're now engaged in the economic war the CCP's been running against us for 20 years, but particularly since May of 2019. You mentioned Macau. I think it's the top 2 or 3 casinos in Las Vegas. The American domicile casinos make essentially all their cash flow in Macau. The ones in Vegas will break even. So Macau awaits you, brother Bolling.
It awaits my U.S. greenback is what it awaits. Hey, Mad Dog, play that soundbite. We just played it, Steve. I'm sure you've heard it a bunch today, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on Meta. A senior executive at Meta telling the world that they were giving our information, important information about Americans, handing it over to the CCP. Listen.
I saw Meta executives repeatedly undermine U.S. national security and betray American values. They did these things in secret to win favor with Beijing and build an $18 billion business in China.
Definition of treason, though.
Pretty close. This is why I believe, given all the pressure, Eric, that the head of Meta, Zuckerbucks, has put on President Trump. I think the trial, unless anything's broken since I've gotten into the get ready for the war room, I think the trial starts Monday in Washington, D.C. I think it's the FTC taking them to court. It would be first of many, but they have put tremendous pressure on President Trump and his administration to basically get rid of this. But that whistleblower is brutal. We had her on the show, and she just goes through list after list after list of how they've lied to people, how they work with the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, Zuckerberg's a thoroughly bad guy. I say it all the time. I think he's a criminal. I think he's a criminal alone for what he did in 2020. You add this on top of it, I agree with you, sir. I think it is treason.
You got to be. I mean, handing over our vital information, not even selling it. I mean, they're handing it over for what, to gain favor with the Chinese National Party. For what reason? You want to tap into the Chinese consumer, fine, but why are you handing it over to Beijing?
Well, to kowtow, that's what they do. Remember, if you want to have, and they're talking about delisting the Chinese companies here. We're going to talk about in the show today, the SEC. This is a major strategic move. But if you actually go into China, you have to form a joint venture where they basically take your intellectual property. And so Meta and companies like this go out of their way to basically kowtow to the Chinese Communist Party. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party is just another dynasty. It's just like the emperors of old. And Zuckerberg would go and just kowtow to him and give him everything. I mean, her book and her eyewitness accounts of this, and you can tell something's up, Eric, because they went out of their way to try to crush her. They went out of their way to try to suppress they went to the publisher. I think it's Macmillan, one of the oldest publishers in the world, very prestigious. And they went to Macmillan, put pressure on them not to release the book. So that tells you right there how radioactive this material is, and kind of how these big tech companies behind your back are really kowtowing to communists.
Crazy. How does this end, Steve? You got two, Xi Jinping. I had Dr. Drew on a little while ago, talked about he's a relationship guru. I was like, I got two folks. I'm trying to figure out how they're going to fix this relationship, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. They got two big egos. How does this fix itself?
I don't think it does fix itself. I think they've been in unrestricted warfare against the United States for 20, 25 years. When they didn't sign the deal, President Trump for 2 years, the first 2 years of administration, had Lighthizer, Navarro full time on this huge deal with Lee Hood, the number 3 guy in the regime. And in May, after meeting with Putin in One Belt, One Road, they said no. Wang Qishan told Xi, if you sign this up, you're always going to be subservient to the Americans, to the foreign devils. And they didn't do it. And since then, they declared a people's war. And we're in it now, folks. I just hope people are taking this seriously enough. Even President Trump saying, hey, I like Xi. I admire him. We make a deal. I don't think there's a deal to be made here. One side wins and one side loses.
It is interesting how we've basically painted China into the corner. I mean, we still are we got the money. We're the ones who have the money. I know we sell them treasuries. I'm going to say a word that I'm probably going to get in trouble for. It's when they tell us, oh, you better worry because China holds our treasuries. China can't afford us going bankrupt. China can't afford to destabilize our country because they will eat it worse than we will. Final thought. I know it's your show coming up.
Eric, no, I love this. Is why I love the exchange. You're both a finance guy and a business guy and a degenerate gambler, I might add. The guys in Macau await you. No, I think it's to the point. This is why like things like the Chinese railroad bonds are still around there. People are talking about, hey, swap out. I actually believe some of these deals going forward on the reciprocity, Eric. Don't be surprised if 3 months from now, 4 months from now, 5, you see Scott Bessent come up with a proposal that maybe, hey, part of the way to close this trade gap is maybe you take a different type of security that's maybe got some longevity to it. I think folks have to understand in the overall trade, President Trump is a deal maker. They're going to look at a lot of different things. With China, I think it's beyond a trade deal. Pete Hegseth, your buddy, is down in Panama signing an MOU. We're sending Army Rangers down there to do exercises, and he says, "Hey, if anything comes up, we're gonna seize the locks in the canal." That's Pete Hegseth is not a guy that throws out things like that, right? So game on.
Don't fool yourself. That timing of that is perfectly placed. Now that is where they're playing 3D chess with the world. Steve, your show, brother. Looking forward to watching it. Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much. Love doing the handoff.